And we are in chapter 28. Chapter 28 will be on page 301. And the title of chapter 28 is Man Refused Yahweh's Righteousness. He chose war. It's a must that his choice be shown and brought forth. And this, of course, was done on, this sermon was given on Yaakov 19, which Roman month was 9/29/2018. And a pastor, of course, he starts out, Shalom, everyone, praise Yahweh. You see this, and he praises Yahweh for everyone that's showing up on the Sabbath, and he truly rejoices. And of course, he says, the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. And he starts out over here around verse 5 over here. He's going through a little bit of the history. He's going through some history here, and he's showing. He mentions that nobody can foretell prophecy. No one has ever proved that they could foretell prophecy. And they can take a wild guess at it. He says, but they can't prophesy what's going to take place tomorrow. You can't prophesy as to what's going to take place in the next hour, or you really can't even prophesy what's going to take place in the next 2 minutes. It's not possible. Yahweh can, and Yahweh has proven over and over and over that, that He alone has the ability to foretell what is going to take place. And Pastor shows here. He says, he brings up the peaceful solution. And he mentions the peaceful solution screens on the back of the sanctuary. And have you read them yet? He says there will be more going to be going up. If you start in the center of the sanctuary and read those, he says they will show you. And he makes a point here in verse 5, and he shows that salvation was shut down in Genesis chapter 4. And when you think about it, and when it's right there for us, but it takes a teacher to actually point these things out to us. And he shows that salvation was shut down in Genesis chapter 4. He says you can see it shut down. Prophecy shows in Genesis chapter 49 that it won't be offered again and it won't be brought back again until the last days when Yahweh's house is reestablished. And then, notice it will never be shut down again. Remember and I think we're going to get into it here. Yahshua mentioned that the gates of Sheol and the gates of hell will not prevail against this work. Remember your history. Remember the previous eras of the House of Yahweh were all shut down. They were all wiped out, except for this last work, this seventh lamp, which is represented by that seventh lamp on the lampstand, which is going to continue burning brightly. And it's the seventh era, that we are blessed to be a part of in these days, is actually going to usher in this kingdom, and it is actually through this house that salvation is once again being offered, to the world. And then in verse 6 here he says, those are the words of Yahshua, Matthew 16:18. He says, the gates of hell will not prevail against this work. Yahweh allowed it to be shut down before. Now remember, there is nothing that takes place in Yahweh's plan. Nothing takes place. Nothing at all is taking place unless Yahweh allows it, unless it's being allowed in Yahweh's plan. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that in our lives. We have to remember it in everything that's going on in the world today. That nothing is being done outside of Yahweh's plan. He says he allowed Abel to be killed. Yahweh allowed Abel to be killed. Now think of this. And you think of this. Satan and her gods, they knew the plan of Yahweh and they killed Abel. And Pastor shows here, he says she must have been laughing so hard that her sides were hurt and thinks that she has stopped the plan of Yahweh. She didn't know the complete plan of Yahweh. There are things that were hidden from her. But she knew the plan of it. She knows the plan of Yahweh that mankind is going to take over. And she thought that she had the ability, and she thought that she actually put an end to that plan right then and there. But the plan of Yahweh is given in Genesis 1:26, which shows that I'll make mankind, I'll make man in my image, and I will give him authority. And that's what he's going to do. That's all part of the plan of Yahweh. That's why we're here. We're being made when we submit to the laws of Yahweh. As Psalm shows us, the laws of Yahweh are perfect, and they will convert us from this carnal character that the world is filled in, from the character that we had when we came to Yahweh's house, into his perfect righteous character that will rule exactly as he rules. But we have to allow the laws of Yahweh to work within us in order for that to take place. But this is what it will take place if we allow this. And Pastor, he touches on that here in just a few pages over. But continuing on now, and down here in verse 7. Down here in verse 7, Pastor makes a comment here, and I want you to, we need to, keep this in mind. He says, you never quit learning. Think about that. We never quit learning. We're always learning something. The people that leave and go someplace else for 6 months, they come back. And the house of Yahweh has grown so much in knowledge that they'll never catch up because they've lost 6 months. You think about that. If you stop reading, if you stop learning, and you pick it up 6 months later, and you've got that 6 months of idle time, that 6 months of time that you won't get back. That's why it's important for us to redeem the time. And Pastor, he talks about, making the positive use of all of the time that we have in order to put this knowledge. He says, those who are here and not studying like you should, you're getting behind, and you'll get to where it doesn't make any sense to you. If you can remember, man, some of you are older, and some of us are older. Let me rephrase that. Some of us are older, and you can remember, I remember going to school, and if I missed a certain amount of school and I went back a week later, and, well, wait a minute, I missed these 5 classes. How in the world are you getting this, with this math problem, how are you arriving over here? How are you getting that? How do you figure that out? Well, it was because that time was missed. And it was difficult to try to get that it had to work doubly hard to try to get caught up. Well, just think how it is with going this 6 months, as Pastor says, or if we, or for whatever length of time, especially with the amount of knowledge that's coming forth. If we don't keep up with it, we're going to get lost, and it's not going to make sense. He says, you really need to make this first in your life. Seek first, he says. That's it. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and the rest of these things will be added to you. Everything, he says, including eternal life. Psalm 23, and, he mentions Psalm 23. He says that doesn't change. It doesn't change the translation we have in the book of Yahweh, but as it so often comes out in Hebrew, there's a secondary thing that's shown in there, but it's hidden. Pastor has always shown that, the scriptures can have multiple meanings when you look into the Hebrew words and you look into the definitions. There's deeper meanings that go with this, and he's going to explain that here. He explains that here with Psalm 23, and I think he's speaking of specifically verse 5, I think is what the great Kohan Yehuda was talking about at that point. In Psalm 23:5 it reads, you prepare a table for us in the presence of our enemies, and you anoint our heads with oil, and our cups overflow. And, and Pastor shows here, he says, what's this oil that's coming forth from the 2 witnesses that's shown in Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 5, chapter 4, Zechariah chapter 5, and Revelation chapter 11? Is it referring to the 2 witnesses and their golden oil, this knowledge that flows freely from them? Well, yeah, it's talking about that for sure, yes. It does mean that, but it also means the ashes of the red heifer are going to be brought back in this generation. Now, you think about that and how all of that comes from that word oil. That tremendous knowledge that comes forth from this study. He said, and you think about it, these ashes for the red heifer, he says, they're life. It's life brought back in this generation. You think about what the ashes of the red heifer does. It cleanses us from what? Praise Yahweh, it cleanses us from death. Now, I think I've asked this before, but men, have you ever experienced anything after you've been sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer, other than being a little wet? Anybody ever experienced being dehydrated? Anybody ever experienced being extremely tired or sleeping very, very well the night that we get sprinkled? What's that telling you? Praise Yahweh. That's telling you that those ashes are doing their job. The microorganisms are doing their job. They are doing something to us. They are cleansing us for the purpose that Yahweh has set forth. Man, I don't know if that's proof of what Yahweh can do with what the world considers foolishness. Because think about it. I mean, the world would think that's foolish. Going around sprinkling ash water on the back of my neck like that's going to do anything with that plant on these specific days of the week? Are you serious? But we know because we have experienced that. And we know that it absolutely is doing something. But we're not going to know, and we don't know to what extent, really, that those ashes are cleansing and protecting us. But we believe and we trust in Yahweh and the plan of Yahweh and the instructions that come forth from his house and the instructions that come forth from the witness, that these things are beneficial. Okay? But we see here in verse 9 here, verse 9 here shows that Yahweh's plan of creation is mankind being on trial. Remember, the great Kohen Yehuda, he's bringing forth the trial. He's bringing forth the Satan's murder trial. He's bringing forth that. And if you really think about it, you start looking at the scriptures, there is legal stuff. There is stuff concerning trials. There's stuff concerning lawyers. There's stuff concerning, judgments. Everything related to courts of law is just oozing out of the scriptures. And we are, this plan is on trial. This plan of he is going to make mankind into his image is on trial. And this plan is going to be completed with the work that's being done with the seventh Malach, with this era that we have been called into, with this era that we are a part of. And we are a part of that work. And this is the finishing work where mankind, what was promised to him in Genesis chapter 1 is going to be fulfilled. You think about that. The fulfilling of being made in the image and likeness of Yahweh. With the authority, when we qualify, with the authority that is going to be given as sons to help rule the universe. It's mind-blowing what is being offered. And Pastor shows here, he says, I know you don't see it yet. You haven't discovered it yet, but it's talking about running a race. He says it shows you in that verse when that race is going to be instituted in Yahweh's work, and Yahweh's work has got to be instituted for it to be there in that work. Yahweh wants you to understand that he has everything concerning his plan written so they couldn't deny what he's going to do. Okay? It's written down. It's in proof. It's right there. This is what I'm going to do. And it's those words that are on trial. And it's that which is what is on trial. He says, it's hidden sometimes to protect it from Satan, but it's all going to be revealed in this era. All these things are being revealed now. He says, don't forget any of these things. He's guarding his house. He's guarding his house to keep the same thing from occurring that occurred with the other 6 works of the house of Yahweh. He says, we are the 7th work and the light that never goes out. And remember the promise that's given in the next verse down in Isaiah chapter 34, verse 16. It says, he promises you that not one of these prophecies will fail. Not a single prophecy, not a single word, not a single letter is going to fail. He says he puts his word out to heaven and earth, and if they failed, where would that put him? But they're not. They're not going to fail. And he says over here on the top of verse 13 over here on page 303, he says, in Revelation 13:10, it says, he who has an ear, let him hear this, and it's very important. He says, he is for captivity, will go into captivity, for he is for the sword, for war must be killed with the sword. It's a must. It's not a might, it's not a maybe, but it's a must for it to be done. It's taking place right now in front of our eyes. And he says this word sword there actually means war. If you look up in Strong's, it means war and fighting. And a little bit further down here, he shows here in this final judgment here in Daniel 7. And he shows how it involves the four horns of the golden altar. How the quartet, the quartet that's doing all the slaughtering. And remember what that golden altar represents. That's that altar of death. It represents this great burning that's going to take place. The 4/5 of the earth's population that's going to be destroyed. It's going to be burned up. That's what that altar represents. And it's the four horns. It's the four horns of this quartet. It's the quartet that's bringing this all about. Now, Daniel 2 is where he showed the first beast coming up. And he says the governments. He says those are of the Nimrod military school of training. Let me see where we want to go here. Okay, verse 17 down here, he says, Yahweh's not dealing with anyone else. He's just dealing with the 12 tribes, the 3 million people he brought up out of Egypt. Now, notice the words here. The words, and this is why it's important for us to read every word. Think about this. He says he's dealing with the 12 tribes, the 3 million people he brought out of Egypt. But they didn't come out of Egypt. He says he brought them out of Egypt. See? He brought them out of Egypt, physically brought them out of the land of Egypt, but they never came out. They never left that way of life behind. They never left that way behind. Their minds, they were still with this God worship. It was just like Lot's wife. Remember Lot's wife, she turned back. She turned back and she looked back and she longed for the way that she was leaving behind. It wasn't that poof, she was turned into this pillar of salt. It's still standing out there somewhere, which is what the people believe. But the great Kahan, he pointed out how that shows that she actually turned back and she became a servant of the gods. She never left that way. She didn't come out. She didn't come out of that way of life. Okay? But Pastor, he shows here, and he gets into the genes. He says, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't planted somewhere, if Abraham's seed wasn't found in our genes, in our DNA somewhere in this encoding, and he gets into this encoding, and he talks about each living cell, Yahweh has a code in it. Okay, it has a code, and he contains a code of law that was put there by Yahweh. And if you remember some of the sermons that Pastor gave on the genes and things like that, on how each cell has this DNA, and inside this DNA is the instructions on how to put somebody together. It says, okay, this cell is going to be a heart cell. This one's going to be a brain cell. This one's going to be, this is going to be part of a fingernail. This is going to be a big toe. This is going to be this is going to be a hair. This is going to be part of an eyelash. This is going to be your eye. This is going to be a mouth, the tongue, whatever. Each of these, all of those instructions are encoded inside something so small you can't see it with the naked eye. You have to, and you can't even see the DNA strands with a microscope. There's certain things that have to be done in order to isolate those DNA strands. Those encoded instructions, they have to be able to do something to the cell to extract that, and then they have to do something to actually stretch it, to make it bigger, so they can actually read it. I mean, it's amazing what Yahweh has done. It's amazing. And then he talks about, in this is what makes a cow, or makes a sheep, or what makes you. It's totally amazing when you see that. And he created that from that little bitty cell that you can't see. And that he programmed it. He programmed it, specifically talking about the cow. He says he programmed that cow to eat the grass, eat weeds, and eat leaves, and to put on the meat for you to eat. And he shows that cows were made for man. They were put on the earth for mankind. And then he says that he programmed those things into that one little cell that you can't see, and that's Yahweh's creation. And then look at verse 22. He says, if you're not too stubborn and bullheaded, stiff-necked, rebellious is one way to put it. Stubborn and bullheaded is another way that he put it. But you can achieve that authority. But it's up to us And, it's up to us to be able to, it's up to us to be able to want to desire those things. And remember what that title is, the title of the sermon here. It says, man refused Yahweh's righteousness. Okay, and that is what he's saying here. If you're not too stubborn and bullheaded, if you don't refuse righteousness, then we can have, we can qualify to receive this great authority. And he says, and that's what Yahweh says in Genesis 1:26, I'm going to give to man this authority. I'm going to make him into my image and my likeness. He's going to have my authority. He said that to heaven and earth, and he said they're going to rule like I rule, and they'll put a stop to war. And he says all of that, all those things are in your genes. You can discard it. It's up to you. It's up to you to accept it. You can discard it and throw that gene away, or you could let it grow and feed it. Then he asks the question, you know what it feeds on? He says, you can't see it. You can't see it taking place from my head to your head, but it's going from my head through my mouth to you. He says it's entering into your ears and to your brain. What you do with it, it's your doing. But you have the opportunity to have this kind of power, brethren. You have that opportunity. You see, the opportunity is going forth. The information is going forth. And it's coming to us, and it's up to us on what we choose to do with it. Okay, and Daniel 7:26, and it talks about the judgments. And remember, the judgments are already, the judgment is set already. It was set in the beginning. The plan was in the beginning. The judgments, the laws of Yahweh are perfect. The judgments are already set. He says, and he shows here, he's talking about, he says, the judgment is set and they will take away his government. That is, the governments. It should be plural, to consume and destroy them completely. This is what Malachi 4 said. He says, why is it a must for them to kill themselves? Why is it a must for mankind? Why are they having to do this? He says, well, they've got to prove to themselves that Yahweh is right and they're wrong. Remember, Yahweh's not holding anything back. They said, Satan said, well, Yahweh, we can have peace if you just leave us alone and let us do it our way. Okay, there you go. Have at it. Do it your way. Have peace. Test and prove me now, but you're not going to succeed. And you know what? For over 6,000 years, mankind has been attempting to have peace, and they haven't achieved it yet. And they won't achieve it. But we have the ability, and we have the knowledge, and we are attaining the knowledge, and we're learning how to convey that knowledge to the world right now. And this is part of our job. This is what we're doing. But they have to prove to themselves that Yahweh is right and that they're wrong. Satan and her gods are wrong. It's a trial. And he goes back to that trial. He says, I'll do this with mankind, this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to write it out. I have my prophets write it. I'll inspire men to do everything to bring himself forth to be like me. And that's what he's laid down for heaven and earth to see. And that is what's going to be proven in trial. Yahweh's plan is going to be proven the only way to life. Plain and simple. That's going to be the ultimate judge. That's going to be the judgment of the kingdom of Yahweh. That is the judgment. Now, Pastor over here, in verse 30. Nope. Let's go back up to verse 28. It says, like Yeshua said, hell is not going to prevail in this time. The seventh work is the one that Yahweh prophesied will not be destroyed. He has already prophesied that others would. Yeshua didn't come to bring peace on the earth at that time, and he told you that flat out. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring war between a son and his father. Here you have a father is right. Here you have a father. A father is righteous and wants his son to be righteous, but Yeshua came to bring friction between them, and he did it. He brought friction between a daughter and a mother. That's why he came for. Why? He said, I'm separating my people from Satan the devil. Satan the devil is going to die, and so will all of those who will not be changed over by Yahweh, who will not submit. And remember, it's those laws that are going to convert us over. He says, you can't see the spirit that's coming from this book of Yahweh that's changing you, but it's doing it. It's doing it. It's reaching from my mouth to your ears right now. And what a miracle. And you think about that. And he talks about what a miracle it is. Think about what a miracle it is for a man to talk. Think about what a miracle it is to have those sound waves that are going forth, actually entering into our ears, registering as words into things that we can understand. I mean, that in and of itself is mind-boggling as well. I don't know where time went, but it sure went. Okay. And then Pastor, of course, he gets into, he gets into the increase in knowledge on page 306. He talks about the knowledge increase, which started back in 1934. And, which is, what, of course, we know that the birth of the last day's witness was in 1934. The computers were created in 1934. The patent for the nuclear explosion was patented in 1934. This is when this knowledge increase was back in 1934. And we've proven that over and over and over throughout history. In Revelation 13:9, if any man has an ear, let him hear. Verse 10, he who is for captivity will go into captivity. Now think about this. You who bully, if you bully, guess what? That's captivity. You bully a person into doing what you want, that's captivity. If you're for captivity, you're going to go into captivity. The same as those who are for war, for killing, for hitting, or slapping. Yeshua included all of those things in war. Turn the other cheek, he said. Don't let them do the same, and then let them do the same to your other cheek. But don't ever think about striking back. Don't ever think about revenge or retaliation. That's the perfection that Yahweh said you're going to come to. And that is a very difficult thing to do. But men, the more we practice these things, the more that we practice these laws and we put forth the effort in practicing them, the easier they're going to come. How many people in here are tempted to eat a pepperoni pizza? Anybody in here tempted to eat pepperoni pizza anymore? When somebody mentions the word pepperoni pizza, what comes to your mind? Is it yum or is it yuck? Okay. Men, it's going to be the same thing. The more we practice it, it's going to be the same thing with any other law of Yahweh. It's going to be the same thing when an adulterous thought comes into our minds. It's going to be the same thing when somebody does something evil, like hitting, slapping, or spitting on us. That thought of retaliation is going to be, that thought of retaliation is not going to enter. It's going to dissipate. It's going to be gone. That thought of retaliation is going to be just like it is when that thought of somebody trying to give you a piece of pork. It's going to be that same way. And this is how each and every one of Yahweh's laws are going to bring. The more we practice them and the more we stick to them, the easier it's going to be to resist them. And it's going to become part of our nature. It's going to be second nature, where we're not even going to have to think about it. Yeah, we're not even going to have to think about it. We're not even going to be tempted by it because it's going to be a part of us. It's going to be a part of our very being. It's going to be part of our DNA. It's just going to be part of it's going to be a very part of us. But it takes effort in order to make that change. Giving up that pepperoni pizza wasn't the easiest thing in the world to do in the beginning. But now you wouldn't give it a second thought. That's the conversion of Yahweh. That's the power that Yahweh has to be able to convert us. Think about any little thing that we've overcome that, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's something that you wouldn't even dream of doing right now that maybe you had difficulty with in the past. But everything, it's going to progress and it's going to be that way. And it's going to be to the point where, there's going to be absolutely no way that we can be tempted to break any one of Yahweh's 613 laws. And that's what the patient persistence in doing righteousness will do for us. It will ultimately convert us into that perfect righteous character of Yahweh, which will allow us to be a part of the fulfillment of that Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. So with that, Yahweh be with you. Yahweh bless you. And if everyone will please stand, I'll turn the class over to the great Kaham Matithya Hawkins.
Praise God. Shabbat Shalom, men. You may be seated. You can be seated. Forgive me. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We're going to be continuing on where the great Compria left off. We're going to be in the 18th book of Yisrayl. We're going to be picking up on page 307. And just as a quick reminder, the title of this sermon that Pastor gave on Yaqob 19:20-18 or 9:29-18, man refused Yahweh's righteousness. He chose war. It's a must that his choice be shown and brought forth. So we're going to pick up here on page 307. And we're going to be reading here in Revelations chapter 13, verses 2 through 4 here on the page, where it says, And the dragon gave him his power, and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered and followed after the beast. Do we see the world at this time? Do we see them following Yahweh? No, just as Revelations 12:9 says, the whole world is deceived, and we see them following this beastly system, this beastly Nimrod system. And they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast. Pastor says the fourth beast here in verse 47 of the 18th book of Yisrayl on page 307, verse 47, he says, the fourth beast, Revelation 17 shows you where she sits. There's no doubt about who it's speaking of. It shows you she sits on 7 hills. You can't find another one that sits on 7 hills, that is the leader of the kings of the earth, the religions of the earth. Every religion except the House of Yahweh teaches war. Every religion. There are 4,199 of them in this generation, and they're getting their teaching from the one that follows the system of Nimrod, the Nimrod military school of training. And in this system that we see brought forth, they do have like specific schools of military training. You have your West Point Academy and the different levels of education that they send their top generals and things, or their future top generals to. But even on the average level for each individual in society today, you can see this military school of training, this teaching of war. As Pastor talked about, even in kindergarten, every child in kindergarten is taught to, color soldier boys and army tanks, and they're taught this system that it's a must, that you must fight to stay on top, or you must fight for your freedom. In Revelations 13:4, and they worshiped the dragon which gave power to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Who can make war? See, you're back to the war. He who is for war. Revelations 13:10. It's a must for them to be killed by war. And we can see this on the earth today, that all the wars that have ever been fought have never resulted in any lasting peace. It's a temporary relief from their enemies until their enemies are able to get stronger than they are. Because this war, it's a must for those who war to die. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. Remember what Yeshua said, what he told those that were with him when they had this thinking that, we're going to fight our way out of something. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. We as saints of Yahweh, we aren't to have that thought pattern that solving our problems through force is a way to solve them. It's hard to overcome, right? Because the carnal mind, it wants you to be, get back, get even. They did what? I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna let him hear it. But we have to remember that those who war will die. Okay, and it's a must. It's the result of partaking in that lifestyle. Even some of the commentators, Pastor says in verse 49, say that say and point out that the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, is for war. She's always been that way. She sends her soldiers out. And they're the ones that, they'll talk about just wars. Well, this is a just war, and these people are suffering, so we need to alleviate their suffering by killing their enemies. But this is the teacher. The Roman Catholic Church has been the teacher of this kind of mentality of this this Roman system of conquering and dividing and destroying, killing your enemy. Someone wrongs you, get back, get even with them. We're going to skip down here on page, down at the bottom of the page, Pastor says, in the last verse there, verse 50, he says, that's what's going to be. It won't be anything more or less. They're going to be killed by war. Those who are for war, it's a must that they be killed by their own doing. Okay, and this is how we're going to see the sinners will actually destroy themselves. Yahweh's not going to give us some weapons stronger than their weapons to go kill them. No, they're going to destroy themselves, and we the saints of Yahweh are going to be the ones to pick up the pieces and start cleaning up the earth and start teaching again how to have life. Just like it's a must for you to enter the kingdom of Yahweh by your own determination in following righteousness. You see, so in order for us to enter the kingdom of Yahweh, we have to have this determination in following righteousness. Stronger than that carnal inclination to want us to get even or get back or war or fight or try to get one over. Revelations 13 verse 5, and there was given unto him a mouth, that's the Pope, speaking great things. That's the mouthpiece given in Daniel 7. Speaking of the fourth beast and blasphemies, yes, they blaspheme the name of Yahweh even today, and power was given unto him to make war. Make war. Here is the time period that was brought out by the great Khan Ilya Hyler Hawkins this morning in the news. This time period is shown here to make war for 42 moons or months. That's 3.5 years. The last 3.5 years. Yeshua said in Matthew 24, 21 through 22, that it's going to be the greatest tribulation, and it's going to have to be cut short. It will have to be cut short, or Yahweh's prophecies for you would not come to pass. Nothing is going to harm you, brethren. You're going to go through this unless you turn against Yahweh. He keeps telling you there's a chance. He keeps telling you, fear not. Remember that. It means that you could turn and give in to fear. You better keep all these things in mind. It's very short in coming now. They're working on these 3.5 years now. Well, we know that these 3.5 years started back this year, earlier this year there, right around Pentecost there in the 6th Roman month, when they finished the part of moving the embassy and not signing any more of those waivers on moving that embassy, which got the ball to rolling. So we only have about 3 years now left. And you can see the anger in the nations. And you can also see the tests and the trials that we, the great saints of Yahweh, have been going through for the past, 5 or 6 moons here. And remember here what Pastor says here about we have nothing to fear during this last 3.5 years unless we turn from Yahweh. And he says, he keeps telling you there's a chance. He keeps telling you, fear not. Okay, so there's going to be that thing or event or reason to come that could cause fear in our minds. And Yahweh commands us to fear not. Fear not. Now when Pastor says here about you will be protected, nothing's going to harm you, brethren. You're going to go through this unless you turn against Yahweh. Now, I was thinking here of what Solomon wrote here in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 for your notes. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verses 1 through 4, but really just in highlight here, he says, keep your foot, watch your step when you go to the house of Yahweh. In verse 2, do not be rash or reckless with your mouth. Do not think of hastily uttering a word before Yahweh. And then in verse 4 he says, when you make a vow to Yahweh, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed to pay. And the side note C there, Pastor shows here, it says, each makes a vow when baptized. In the side note of our book, Yahweh, Ecclesiastes 5, verse 4, each makes a vow when baptized. And if you remember that, we all, all of us who have been baptized, maybe some of those that are here or studying with the house or working towards that, but the majority of us here have all made that baptism vow. And it's that covenant with Yahweh to never willingly sin again. And then there's even little like statutes and judgments there. All those little questions we went through about believing in the one Yahweh has sent. Believing in Yisrayl Hawkins. Believing in the authority of the House of Yahweh. The House of Yahweh is the pillar and ground of the truth, the only established work of Yahweh. So when Pastor says here that we're going to go through this time period unharmed unless we turn against Yahweh, we have to remember that's unless we start breaking our vows, unless we turn from the instructions and the guidelines that we've been given. So we have to be mindful to be honorable and be trustworthy and prove to Father Yahweh that He can trust us with this ability to be able to bring forth His plan forever, this peaceful plan that He has for all of creation. Continuing here in Revelations 13, verse 6, on page 308 here, it says, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yahweh. Speaking of the beast, okay, this mouth, this pope, who's making war for this 3.5 years, to blaspheme his name and his house and those who dwell in heaven. And it was given, and almost everything we learn in the house of Yahweh, all the teachings of righteousness we learn in the house of Yahweh, in the world today, those things are trying to be destroyed and demeaned as looking as, some crazy ideas, to believe and trust in the scriptures, to believe and trust that, there's a stipulation that set forth that, a certain individual is that individual, a man is a man and a woman is a woman as they were born, or, that marriage is between a man and his wife. These things in the world today, these are starting to be diminished as being crazy ideas, and those who believe and trust in the scriptures and read the scriptures and study them as we strive to do here at the House of Yahweh, Yahweh willing, we're keeping up in our studies, but those things are made to look as, old-fashioned ideas, useless ideas in this hustle and bustle, fast-paced knowledge technology world that we live in, knowledgeable increase, and the smarts and the wits of all the wise men and all the great men of the earth. And you can see how they're coming against Yahweh's way, and they're coming against righteousness. And this is all coming from the Catholic Church. Although the Catholic Church is very, very sneaky in how they put things out, all these teachings and these pushes throughout the world, these things come from this city that sits on 7 hills. In Revelations 13, verse 7, it says, and it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over all tribes and peoples and languages and nations. In verse 8, and all who dwell upon the earth will worship him. And Pastor says, will serve him with the wars. That's how they're serving him. Wars and with oil, the production of money from the ground, the black gold. What do we see? What do we see spreading? What do we see in the news, day by day and week by week, besides all the other mumbo and jumbo they put on there about, their own little infighting? But we see the desire to conquer and divide and destroy and take what they believe belongs to them from these other nations. The regimes, they don't even call them nations or leaders. They call them these regimes, like there's some, it's like, ooh, it's scary. These guys are nasty people. They could destroy the earth. They always make these little bitty guys, who really they really can't even control their own countries, to the full extent that they desire. They don't have that power, and they make it look like they're going to somehow take over the entire world if they're not stopped. You can see the inspiration that's shown when they push fear into the minds of men. This is why we were reminded not to fear not these things that could come. Revelations 13, verse 8, and all who dwell upon the earth will worship him whose names have not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If you stop and think about it, Pastor says, the foundation of the world was before mankind was made. The foundations of the earth were long before Yahweh created man, but it was the beginning. He said the plan was with him in the beginning to have these little bitty sperm that you can't see, the seed, the cell, believe it or not, the atom. The atom is the smallest of all. From that comes forth your body and your brain. Yahweh, before the foundation, he had this planned and set in law, just like he did with the cow, the horse, the dog, and so forth. It was set in law. And when you look at the creation, even the some of the scientific world, they're able to disprove these crazy theories of evolution and such, because when they look at just like some of the animals and some of the different trees and plants and stuff, they can see the intelligence that's there, and that there had to be some kind of intelligence to create these things to do what they're doing. It couldn't be, they call it natural selection. But it couldn't be just evolved into that. It had to be some kind of intelligence that was placed there. Of course, they don't recognize Yahweh as being the power. They're worshiping their gods and their lords and their dead rabbis. But we can see that Yahweh created these things, and he planned these things from the beginning before he even put these things on the earth. It was set in law. His plan was to allow man to refuse his laws and then show him for 6,000 years what takes place when you refuse his laws. These are the things you will bring upon yourself. Don't do this or you will have these sexually transmitted diseases. You do this and you'll have them. Don't do this or you'll have war and you'll be killing each other. So the do's and the don'ts. Yahweh gave the do's and the don'ts of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Yahweh told Satan, you caused this enmity between your children and my children. You have set enmity here. What you've done is set. How? She had the power of creation at that time. He said, what you have done, you've put in their genes the great enmity to start having war. What you have put in them is hatred for my people, my sons, but my sons are going to overcome. Then he said, but you are cursed. You're cursed for doing this. Get this, please. The one-cell genes that you can't even see, she manipulated them and put war in them. Yahweh had already placed in those cells so man could make his own choice to choose and to accept righteousness and get interested in the work of Yahweh. That work is mentioned throughout the Holy Scriptures. Be a part of it. Practice righteousness. And then just jumping back up there in verse 58, he says, my sons are going to overcome. Okay? Remember, Satan had the power to create, and she used this power to put war into the genes. But Yahweh's sons, we the sons of Yahweh, that's what we're qualifying to be, the sons of Yahweh. We the future sons of Yahweh are going to overcome this desire for war, this desire for hatred. Skipping down here to the next page, to verse 68. In Revelations 13, verse 12, and he exercised all the authority by these same laws, by the same system given in Genesis 10 called the Nimrod system of terror. The people obey the laws of the land because of terror. And think about that. They have these systems set up, and they have to have armies and police, and municipalities and judicial systems to put the fear into people that they gotta do what they're told to do, or they're gonna have to face these fines or, imprisonments or different things. The people obey the laws of the land because of terror. That's still going on. They're not united. They're not in unity. You obey Yahweh's laws because you're in unity with Yahweh. You're practicing Yahweh's laws. That's what makes you righteous. Praise Yahweh. Okay, Yahweh's laws, quickly for your notes, in Leviticus chapter 18, this is a real quick example that shows the simplicity of Yahweh's laws and how they promote unity. Because Yahweh's laws promote unity, whereas the laws of the beast promote terror. But in Leviticus 19, verse 18, it says, "Do not seek revenge nor bear grudge against one of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor, whether a brother or an enemy, as yourself. I am Yahweh." And then for your notes in 1 Yochanan chapter 4 and verse 21, it says, "For we have the commandment from him that he who loves Yahweh must love his neighbor also." Okay, so Yahweh's laws are simple instructions on showing care, consideration, and respect for your fellow man, for your neighbor. And Yahweh's laws, every one of Yahweh's laws promote unity, because, what's the importance of eating clean food, so you can have a clean mind and a clean body so you're able to think and function properly. These things promote unity, whereas the laws of the beast, they promote terror. Be scared. You're going to get in trouble. You broke that law. You ran that red light. And this is why Yahweh's laws are the only system that can hold together a peaceful society. Okay, because each law of Yahweh, one next to the other, they all work in unity in bringing forth that peaceful way of living. And simplistic instructions. Don't do this and make sure you do this. Don't go eat that unclean food and make sure you salt your clean food when you eat it. In verse 79 on page 311, we see here this beastly system here in the United States. Okay, remember what Pastor said back there in verse 68 about they're not united. And, if you turn on the news anytime here around this week or next week or the next several, however many weeks, you can see their disunity, displayed for everyone to see, where they're just fighting one against another, the Reds against the Blues. The beastly system here in the United States is causing, what do you think you see in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and so on? You see, and these other countries around the world, sometimes you'll hear, I think Russia's President Putin, he's one that he likes to make kind of jokes about it a lot. But, they'll say, look at America's internal politics, and we want them shaping the world's view of things. We want them going and telling nations how they need to be ruling their different areas. No, thank you. We'll do without those instructions. And this is what a lot of their mindsets are. Remember, as we see with the different Arab nations, that they're rejecting these Western poles, like these nations right here that Pastor listed, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and so on. They reject the lifestyle of the West, this pull that they have, because they don't want the same consequences that they see coming from the West. There's more than just Hollywood that goes forth to the world that shows, what's coming from this nation. And many countries don't want to have no part with this. But Pastor says this beastly system here in the United States is causing, what do you think you see in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and so on? You see the land being taken from the people by war. And you see what they call democracy being set up. But they use that democracy to their will for whatever they want to use it for. Stealing or whatever. Securing the oil, we're securing the oil, making sure it gets in the proper bank account. It's not really democracy they are passing if they follow the definition of the world, though the definition of the word. That's like saying righteousness is raping babies or molesting women, as you see the same man who's running for the Supreme Court judge is now accused of. There are others coming forth and accusing him. There's a lot of that going on. But this is the same thing we see coming from the Catholic Church, where they promote themselves as being righteous and pious and holier than you are, so don't stand near them. And yet they're using their power to take advantage of others, using their money to force their will upon people that don't really want to have a part of this system. But this beast sets up democracy to take advantage of others. Okay, this is the whole goal of democracy. It's not to make people live peaceful, joyful, abundant lives. It's to be able to take advantage of them. to pull them into this system, make them pay tribute or taxation or whatever it is they're trying to get from them, share their wealth or give them their wealth. If you go over here to the last page of this chapter on page 312, Pastor says, let me put this to the unbelievers quickly again, you who can't believe. Yahweh prophesied his work would start in this generation. He prophesied the knowledge increase. He prophesied the nuclear war that would darken the sun and burn the earth. He prophesied all those things. He even gave you a limit, 1 hour. I bring it out in the letters with the scientific reports. Many of them I've brought out and put in the newsletters. It's gone throughout the world in the news medias. Yahweh prophesied the 1 hour burning long before firecrackers were made, long before the atom was split that brought forth a great power. Think of that. Your body is made up of atoms, the same atoms you make the nuclear bombs of. In fact, everything on the earth is made of atoms. They found a way to harness the great power by splitting the atom and causing a chain reaction of explosions that doesn't cease. The chain reaction is what they're going to use. It's a must. They're going to have to do it. It's a must for them to kill themselves. Okay, so you see here, Pastor showing the fulfillment of Yahweh's prophecies. These things should be enough to convince the unbelievers that Yahweh's word is true. And all these things couldn't just, happen, as the earth says, or the world society says, it just happened. The scientific world, how did the planets form? Well, there was just a bang and boom, it just happened. It all just was there. No explanation beyond that. It just happened. Like they think their diseases and their sicknesses have just happened. We don't know how this occurred. Just boop, new disease came up. How did that occur? But Yahweh's plan is not about happenings. There's occurrences and things that he tells and he wrote and he sent the prophets to write and to show us that these things would come to pass in a certain time period. He prophesied that his work would start in this generation. The House of Yahweh was only established in 1983. It wasn't very long ago. Just 30-something years ago. He prophesied the knowledge increase. Look at how far advanced, technology is today, even compared to 30 years ago. Where today you want to take this class right here and get it to the other part of the earth, it can be done instantaneously. Years ago it had to be, recorded and then put onto a tape and then put into a thing and sent through the mail, and 2-3 weeks later, people will get their class. These things are instant now. He prophesied the nuclear war that would darken the sun and burn the earth. And I haven't seen, I probably don't watch as much news as many, but I try to read the news, throughout the week. And I haven't seen as much talk about nuclear war as we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. Where you see the increase among the nations with their anger, and they're all talking about nuclear war. And this is what Pastor says here in the conclusion of verse 84. They're going to have to do it. They're going to have to use these bombs. It's a must for them to kill themselves. Okay, because this is all they have left. They're not going to all sit down and just agree about disagreeing. They're going to try to force their will upon others, and those same others are going to try to force back, in resistance. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker, Pastor says. Yahweh bless you, man. That concludes chapter 28.